Say to thyself at daybreak, I shall come across the busybody, the thankless, the overbearing, the treacherous, the envious, the unneighborly. All this has befallen them because they know not good from evil. But I, in that I have comprehended the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and the nature of evil, that it is ugly, and the nature of the wrongdoer himself, that it is akin to me, not as partaker of the same blood and seed, but of intelligence and a morsel of the divine, can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can involve me in what is debasing, nor can I be wroth with my kinsman and hate him. For we have come into being for cooperation, as have the feet, the hands, the eyelids, and the rows of upper and lower teeth. Therefore, to thwart one another is against nature, and we do thwart one another by showing resentment and aversion. This that I am, whatever it be, is mere flesh and a little breath, and the ruling reason. Away with thy books. Be no longer drawn aside by them, it is not allowed. But as one already dying, disdain the flesh. It is naught but gore and bones, and a network compact of nerves and veins and arteries. Look at the breath too, what sort of thing it is. Air. And not even that always the same, but every minute belched forth and again gulped down. Then, thirdly, there is the ruling reason. Put thy thought thus: thou art an old man. Let this be a thrall no longer, no more a puppet pulled aside by every selfish impulse, nor let it grumble any longer at what is allotted to it in the present, or dread it in the future. Full of providence are the works of the gods, nor are fortune's works independent of nature, or of the woven texture and interlacement of all that is under the control of providence. Thence are all things derived. But necessity too plays its part, in the welfare of the whole universe, of which thou art a portion. But good for every part of nature is that which the nature of the whole brings about, and which goes to preserve it. Now it is the changes not only of the elements, but of the things compounded of them, that preserve the universe. Let these reflections suffice thee, if thou hold them as principles. But away with thy thirst for books, that thou mayest die not murmuring, but with a good grace, truly and from thy heart grateful to the gods. Call to mind how thou deferrest from these things. Call to mind how thou deferrest these things, and how many times thou hast received from the gods grace of the appointed day, and thou usest it not. Yet now, if never before, shouldest thou realize of what universe thou art a part, and as an emanation from what controller of that universe thou dost subsist, and that a limit has been set to thy time, which if thou use not to let daylight into thy soul, it will be gone, and never again shall the chance be thine. Every hour make up thy mind sturdily as a Roman, and a man to do what thou hast in hand, with scrupulous and unaffected dignity, and love of thy kind and independence and justice, and to give thyself rest from all other impressions. And thou wilt give thyself this, if thou dost execute every act of thy life as though it were thy last, divesting thyself of all aimlessness, and all passionate antipathy to the convictions of reason, and all hypocrisy and self-love and dissatisfaction with thy allotted share. Thou seest how few are the things, by mastering which a man may lead a life of tranquility and godlikeness, for the gods also will ask no more from him who keeps these precepts. Wrong thyself, O my soul. But the time for honoring thyself will have gone by, for a man has but one life, and this for thee is well nigh closed, and yet thou dost hold thyself in reverence, but settest thy well-being in the souls of others. Do those things draw thee at all away, which befall thee from without? Make then leisure for thyself, for the learning of some good thing more, and cease being carried aside hither and thither. But therewith must thou take heed of the other error. For they too are triflers, who by their activities have worn themselves out in life, without even having an aim whereto they can direct every impulse, aye, and even every thought. Not easily is a man found to be unhappy by reason of his not regarding what is going on in another man's soul, but those who do not attend closely to the motions of their own souls must inevitably be unhappy. This must always be borne in mind, what is the nature of the whole universe, and what mine, and how this stands in relation to that, being too what sort of a part of what sort of a whole, and that no one can prevent thee from doing and saying always what is in keeping with the nature of which thou art a part. Theophrastus, in his comparison of wrongdoing, for, speaking in a somewhat popular way, such comparison may be made, says in the true philosophical spirit that the offenses which are due to lust are more heinous than those which are due to anger. For the man who is moved with anger seems to turn his back upon reason with some pain and unconscious compunction, but he that does wrong from lust, being mastered by pleasure, seems in some sort to be more incontinent and more unmanly in his wrongdoing. Rightly then, and not unworthily of a philosopher, he said that the wrongdoing which is allied with pleasure calls for a severer condemnation than that which is allied with pain, and speaking generally, that the one wrongdoer is more like a man, who being sinned against first, has been driven by pain to be angry, while the other, being led by lust to do some act, has of his own motion been impelled to do evil. Let thine every deed and word and thought be those of a man who can depart from life this moment. But to go away from men, if there are gods, is nothing dreadful, for they would not involve thee in evil. But if indeed there are no gods, or if they do not concern themselves with the affairs of men, what boots it for me to live in a universe empty of gods or empty of providence? Nay, but there are gods, and they do concern themselves with human things, and they have put it wholly in man's power not to fall into evils that are truly such. And had there been any evil in what lies beyond, for this too they would have made provision, that it should be in every man's power not to fall into it. But how can that make a man's life worse, which does not make the man worse? Yet the nature of the whole could not have been guilty of an oversight from ignorance, or while cognizant of these things, through lack of power to guard against or amend them, nor could it have gone so far amiss either from inability or unskilfulness, as to allow good and evil to fall without any discrimination alike upon the evil and the good. Still, it is a fact that death and life, honor and dishonor, pain and pleasure, riches and penury, do among men one and all betide the good and evil alike, being in themselves neither honorable nor shameful. Consequently, they are neither good nor evil. How quickly all things vanish away, in the universe their actual bodies, and the remembrance of them in eternity, and of what character are all objects of sense, and particularly those that entice us with pleasure, or terrify us with pain, or are acclaimed by vanity. How worthless and despicable and unclean and ephemeral and dead this is for our faculty of intelligence to apprehend, as also what they really are, whose conceptions and whose voices award renown. What it is to die, and that if a man look at death in itself, with the analysis of reason strip it of its phantom terrors, no longer will he conceive it to be aught but a function of nature. But if a man be frightened by a function of nature, he is childish, and this is not only nature's function, but her welfare. And how man is in touch with God, and with what part of himself, and in what disposition of this portion of the man. Nothing can be more miserable than the man who goes through the whole round of things, and, as the poet says, pries into the things beneath the earth, and would fain guess the thoughts in his neighbor's heart, while having no conception that he needs but to associate himself with the divine genius in his bosom, and to serve it truly. in service of it is to keep pure from passion and aimlessness and discontent with anything that proceeds from gods or men. For that which proceeds from the gods is worthy of reverence in that it is excellent, and that which proceeds from men of love, in that they are akin and at times and in a manner of compassion, in that they are ignorant of good and evil. A defect this no less than the loss of power to distinguish between white and black. Even if thy life is to last 3,000 years, or for the matter of that 30,000, yet bear in mind that no one ever parts with any other life than the one he is now living, nor lives any other than that which he now parts with. The longest life then, and the shortest amount, but to the same. For the present time is of equal duration for all, while that which we lose is not ours, and consequently what is parted with is obviously a mere moment. No man can part with either the future or the past, for how can a man be deprived of what he does not possess? These two things, then, must needs be remembered. The one, that all things from time everlasting have been cast in the same mold and repeated cycle after cycle, and so it makes no difference whether a man see the same things recur through 100 years or 200 or through eternity. The other, that the longest liver and he whose time to die comes soonest part with no more one than the other. It is but the present that a man can be deprived of, if, as is the fact, it is this alone that he has, and what he has not a man cannot part with. Remember that everything is but what we think it. For obvious indeed is the saying fathered on Monimus the Cynic, obvious too the futility of what was said, if one accept the gist of it as far as it is true. The soul of a man does wrong to itself then most of all, when it makes itself, as far as it can do so, an imposthume, and as it were a malignant growth in the universe. For to grumble at anything that happens is a rebellion against nature, in some part of which are bound up the natures of all other things. And the soul wrongs itself then again when it turns away from any man, or even opposes him with intent to do him harm, as is the case with those who are angry. It does wrong to itself thirdly when it is overcome by pleasure or pain. Fourthly, when it assumes a mask, and an act or word is insincere or untruthful. Fifthly, when it directs some act or desire of its own towards no mark, and expends its energy on anything whatever aimlessly and unadvisedly, whereas even the most trifling thing should be done with reference to the end in view. Now the end for rational beings is to submit themselves to the reason and law of the archetypal city and polity, the universe. Of the life of man the duration is but a point, its substance streaming away, its perception dim, the fabric of the entire body prone to decay, and the soul a vortex, and fortune incalculable, and fame uncertain. In a word, all the things of the body are as a river, and the things of the soul as a dream and a vapor, and life is a warfare and a pilgrim's sojourn, and fame after death is only forgetfulness. What then is it that can help us on our way? One thing, and one thing alone, philosophy. And this consists in keeping the divine genius within pure and unwronged, lord of all pleasures and pains, doing nothing aimlessly or with deliberate falsehood and hypocrisy, independent of another's action or inaction, and furthermore welcoming what happens and what is allotted as issuing from the same source, whatever it may be, from which the man himself has issued, and above all waiting for death with a good grace, as being but a setting free of the elements of which every living thing is made up. But if there be nothing terrible in each thing being continuously changed into another thing, why should a man look askance at the change and dissolution of all things? For it is in the way of nature, and in the way of nature there can be no evil. Written at Carnuntum.